this is Angela with Parker's Permaculture. It is a gray day here in Portland, Oregon, gray February day. However, I am thinking more and more about spring. We had a little stint of sunshine earlier this week, and I can't help but think about those first harvests out of my garden that I get in springtime. They tend to be leafy greens, the first high vitamin C, crisp, fresh tasting vegetables out of my garden. But these are crops that I don't actually have to start now in late winter. They're crops that are going to come up for me year after year after year on their own because they are perennial leafy greens. I have done the work early on of seed starting once, or getting a cutting or a root division once, planting them in my garden, and they will look forward to spring the same way I do. They will wake up in the spring, do their own thing, and all I have to do is go out into the garden and harvest them. So let me share with you my top perennial leafy greens for a temperate garden. Number one is French sorrel. I have a whole video diving deeply into this subject. So if you want to know all about growing French sorrel, check out that video. A great early spring green. I don't have to do anything, and it grows fantastically from divisions. If I want to make a new clump of sorrel, I just dig my shovel in and pop up a chunk and plant it somewhere else in my garden, and now I have multiplied it, or share it with friends. Easy, wonderful, bright flavored spring green. Fantastic in soup. Number two is Good King Henry, which I started last year from seed. Another leafy green that you can enjoy early in the season. Now it can get a little bit more tough and bitter as the summer goes on. That is the way of spring greens. They are tender and succulent early in the year, at the time of year when we are craving fresh produce out of the garden, when it's been a long winter eating storage crops, root vegetables, squash, dried fruit, lots of sugary canned things or pickled things. Suddenly we have that burst of bright, fresh foliage that is rich in vitamin C and has such an intense flavor of spring to it. I cannot get enough of greens in the springtime, so I grow several, so let's keep going. Number three is tree collards, which if you watch my videos very much, you know I'm a huge fan of them. You can't grow them in all temperate zones. You're not going to be able to grow them in zone 5, even zone 6. They're going to struggle in the winter. You can take cuttings of them, bring them in the house and plant them back out every year, or you can cover them and bring them into a greenhouse in the winter if you need to. Here, I could just grow them out in my garden. If it gets down to 15 degrees Fahrenheit, I cover them. Tree collards produce greens that don't get tougher and don't get more bitter as the summer goes on. So they're a great perennial spring green, leafy green, but they also produce all the way until after the first frost for me. Next is Turkish rocket. And this is one I started a couple years ago. Another great leafy green, but also it sends up in the spring as well a bolt that looks a little bit like broccoli. In fact, it's called perennial broccoli, but it is not directly related to Brassica oleracea. It's a different species. But it makes these little tiny buds, almost more like broccoli rabe, that you can clip off and throw in stir fries. So it's a leafy green, but it's also a bud green as well. A wonderful, versatile vegetable. I very much prefer to eat the broccoli-like buds and stem than the greens as the season goes on because they can get bitter and tough. Recurring theme here. Spring greens are for the spring because they get bitter and tough as the season goes on. Lastly, I want to talk about an annual that functions as a perennial in my garden. I have a whole video on this as well. This is Swiss chard. Swiss chard is not prone to cabbage loper butterflies, so it's a great choice if you struggle with those in your garden. It is a crop that is a biennial that I let go to seed. It's functionally an annual in my garden. But I let it overwinter and then I let it go to seed. And so it just keeps re-sowing over and over and over. I don't have to do anything. It spreads where it wants in my garden, where the seeds blow and where it's happy. It comes up and I have Swiss chard every year. I have not planted Swiss chard in 14 years in my garden because it just does its own thing and it functions as a perennial even though it's an annual. Some folks might call that a weedy annual, but for me, I want that Swiss chard coming up and so do my ducks and chickens. So I hope that was a helpful look at my favorite perennial leafy greens. It's so important that we fold in more of those leafy greens to our diet. And when we look at perennial greens, they're less susceptible to problems from slugs. A lot of our annual greens are so delicate, and here in the Pacific Northwest, where we have a lot of slugs and snails, they will just mow down those succulent little annual spring greens, but they kind of leave the perennial ones alone a little bit better, or the perennial ones are more robust, have that deep complex root system, they can recover from some slug chewing. So they're a great choice for a permaculture garden. They're also great to tuck in around your fruit guilds in your permaculture garden as well. If you are interested in learning more about perennial vegetables, I grow tons, and I find the older I get, the more I am grateful for them because they are low maintenance and I just get to go out and pick them. So I'll be having more videos on that subject in the coming weeks. Thank you for watching. Please click like and subscribe. That is a wonderful way you can support the work of this channel, and I'll be back very soon.